Good afternoon and good morning. We are here with an illustrious panel of speakers, operators, looking at the Latin American market. So I'd like to welcome our speakers. We have Schwartz from RSI, Rush Street Interactive, Andre Gelfi, who's responsible for the Brazilian market for Betsson, and JD Duarte from Betcris, which is our homegrown operators. So I have to start by saying I am no Latin American expert, having spent most of my career in Asia. However, I imagine that there are it's a lot of similarities between those regions, being termed certainly by perhaps North Americans and Europeans as emerging markets. I think we're going to start with just a few sort of fairly general questions about, our speakers' views of the market, and then perhaps move into more specifics as to, where they see the opportunities. So maybe, JD, we could start with you. As I say, you're the sort of homegrown operator, been operating in the Latin American market for many, many, many years. So from your point of view, and I know that you do operate, sort of globally as well, but, from your point of view, why does the Latin American market at the moment have so much potential? And how perhaps does it compare to other global markets?
Yes, thank you, Ross. Well, the world is only so big, right? And Europe, that's already being fought over by everyone, right? Asia is, I think, an enigma for anyone who's not from there. And Latin America poses a very interesting opportunity because of the passion, I believe, that people have for sports, and actually how big a role sports play in the culture of everyone in Latin America. And it's not only football or soccer, like Americans call it, because the Latinos embrace pretty much any sport as long as they can watch it, as long as they can learn to play it. They will embrace it. Basketball is big, volleyball is big. There's way more than just football. Very similar, I guess, to other regions where you have different types of sports specific to the region. But we do have that big common sport in football that unites us all, right? And I think the key here is that it's the biggest emerging market. 600 plus million people, except for Brazil. You have everyone speaking Spanish. So if you have Spanish and Portuguese, you pretty much have the whole region covered instead of having to develop, multiple languages like in Europe or Asia or Africa. So it's a pretty attractive region from that point of view, right? It does come with its own set of challenges in the sense that most people do not know how to engage in sports betting or gaming in general. You have aspects like technology, payment methods that are in development at the moment. So those are challenges that we navigate every day. But I believe that by positioning ourselves early in the game, we'll have a better result in the end.
So do you mean from a player perspective, from a better perspective, is that they are, they're very passionate about the sport, but they don't necessarily then translate that into betting on it or knowing how to bet on it? Is that what you mean?
Yes, in comparison.
Lacking infrastructure.
Yes, in comparison, if you stop 10 people on the street and you ask if they bet, if you were to do that in Europe versus in Latin America, the number of people who would say they actually have a betting account would be, substantially different, and that's basically because it's a novelty for the mainstream mass. It's not has not been around for a long time. There's no tradition, so it's I believe there's a select group of people who've been exposed to it, right? Who they know about it, they like it, and they engage in it, but it's not as mainstream as it is in other regions.
Interesting. Maybe I'll put the same question to you then, Andre. Obviously, despite the fact that you are born and bred in Brazil, you are, from a European operator. What has been your experience, compared with the European market of perhaps then the player experience, and how much sort of player education you've had to do?
First of all, thanks for the opportunity, Rosa. It's been pretty much consistent with what JD understands from the market. At the end of the day, it's about educating this recreational to the audience, to the experience, to the verticals. You do have a lot of passion for the sport, but at the end of the day, the market as it is now, as we know, is as what I used to call it a hardcore player market. It's just for the experts, and our challenge is to go beyond the experts, to grow the market. So a local approach, educational one, is critical for you to thrive. It's a big shift from European mature approach to the market.
Interesting. And how about you, Richard? How have you found the experience? I mean, obviously, Rush Street Interactive is one of the first, or if not the first, to offer online sports betting and casino in the States. I think it was Illinois, was it, that you were first launched? And how have you found the differences between those markets, even though they're neighbors? Is there an enormous difference?
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of commonalities as well between the markets, where it comes down to offering the players a great user experience, earning the player trust and keeping it at all times. I think in Latin America, there's even more of a need to do that, because I think there's a lot of distrust of these gambling sites, and especially since they've been unregulated for many years, I think a lot of players have had some negative experiences. So I think one of the things to showcase is, because you're regulated, you could do other things besides supporting the local tax base. And you could, in healthcare, in the case of Colombia, you could also support fast payouts. You could support more variety of content. You could do in-game betting from the leagues in a way that you wouldn't be authorized in the past. You could offer a greater variety of slot machines and casino games from more well-known brands, especially the same companies that sell slot machines to the land-based casinos in Latin America. So some familiarity with some of those games already from the players. So I think it's really just legitimizing the industry. And it takes a little bit more time. And of course, payments are a big part of that in Latin America, because there's a diverse set of payment methods, and many of them are being used for the first time now in a regulated environment to support online gambling in a way that wasn't done before. So I think that's a big area focus too.
Right. I mean, payments are always, well, certainly in Asia anyway, they're always, the biggest issue, because being unregulated, there aren't any official, platforms and payment methods available to people. So it's always a bit, the biggest obstacle. But I guess in a regulated market, it's bringing those on board and legitimizing them and making sure that they work. But I mean, apart from payments, what other challenges have you found in entering the market? So, I mean, Andre, you guys you've recently got a license, I believe, in Buenos Aires, and partnered with one of the casinos there, Casino Victoria, I think, right? So which markets have you chosen to enter first, and why? And what were the challenges?
Is this a question to me or to the...
For Andre.
For me, well, the markets, the priorities for this year for us are basically Brazil, where I'm based and speaking from, Argentina, as you said, we got the license in there, and Colombia, where we also acquired a stake of a local operator. So those are the markets that we are currently pushing forward and dragging our attention today. Talking specifically about Brazil and what you mentioned before about the challenges, it goes back to the education of the player. It's not about just bringing them, but retaining them, giving them a good experience at the end of the day. it's about the challenge on retention is also critical, in my opinion.
So really, so not only just onboarding them, but then customer retention as well. I mean, do you find that it's hard to distinguish yourself from other operators in the market?
It's absolutely critical. I think there is a big challenge in that sense, especially when we talk about onshore activity, when we talk about a regulated market that you're going to go after. As the market as it is, specifically in the case of Brazil, it's still an offshore market. It's pretty much the same audience. The audience is growing, but the bulk of it is pretty much a hardcore player kind of profile. We do believe that this is going to change drastically down the line in terms of necessities, and retention will be critical for us to get the right feed for this audience down the line.
How about you, JD? How do you view that, that aspect of sort of customer retention? Do you find that sort of not so much of a challenge since you've been in the market for much longer, or there's more brand recognition perhaps, or?
Yes. Well, definitely when you have a chance to educate the market, and the first experience of the customer is with you, and it's a positive one, you definitely have a better chance of keeping those customers for a long time. But as we go mainstream, as we try to broaden, the net and spend more money marketing, sponsor leagues, football teams, get brand ambassadors, and you start talking to, a wider audience, and these people start to get curious, right? So they come in, they open an account, and from that point on, it's really, it's really up to them to decide whether they enjoy the experience or not. Because what happens when someone comes in, they open an account, they send the equivalent, say, of $50, and they lose their bets. They lost their first bet. They still do not understand how it works, and their first experience was, oh, I'm out $50. That's a customer that if he didn't go through the learning curve of really understanding how it works, and that his decisions that I guess brought the outcome of whatever happened, that's complicated. But the main thing for Latin America, and this is a little bit of a secret recipe for everyone, not so much, but the word of mouth in Latin America is super important. Having an existing customer explaining to his friend how it works is key, because it's not Latinos are not going to trust the ad on TV. They're not going to trust what it says on the website. They need to trust someone telling them, explaining it to them how it works. So that human involvement, that from a friend who's saying, "Hey, I placed a bet on this game," and then from the other side, someone says, "What do you mean? How does it work?" That's magic. That's where the magic happens, really, in my opinion, right? Of course, everything else is important, having the right information, the right process, the right promotions, definitely focus on user experience, beginning to end, and all the CRM strategies, all the business intelligence tools, all of that is super important. But in the end, you're talking to a human, and they have aspirations, right? And they want to either place a bet to enjoy the game, to take it to a different level of enjoyment, right? Or they're actually thinking that they can make money with this, right? And in Latin America, most people, what they have been exposed to is lottery. So the lottery is really what they know, what they talk about with the family, with the friends. Or I almost won, or I won this prize, right? And lottery is definitely, I think, the most popular form of gaming in all of Latin America, as in other regions of the world. So we need to talk to them from that point of view, I believe. This is a sports lottery, right? Different from other markets, maybe the American market a little bit, where people like to play, they like to choose one selection and place a large sum on that. In Latin America, everyone is betting the toothpick to win the lumberyard, right? They're looking at it like, all right, I bet $2 and I want to win 20,000, right? So that brings in another element, which is, the player segments and the average bet of the market, which is lower than other regions, of course, right? When you take that into account, then you have to adjust your strategies, your budgets, right? Because it is not the same as operating in Europe or other markets.
So revenue per player is lower, or is it more just the bet sizes? Maybe Richard, you could talk about, how you have adapted your marketing and communication strategies to the players, in Latin America versus, for example, in the States.
Right. Well, I think what we did was we really learned the local market and approached everything completely as its own market, and not try to take things from the U.S. and apply them to Latin America, but really try to study the psychology of the players, the environment. Obviously, the payments are a big part of that, where there's a cash market that's larger in Latin America, where people like to sort of pay their, go to local stores and pay their, make their deposits there in cash. And of course, in all markets, people like to win and get paid cash out. I think in Latin America, you're actually stronger than you are in the U.S. in many cases in that area, a lot more flexibility and choices. So I think ultimately the spend is, per player is lower in different countries based on the per capita wealth and economic situation in different countries. But I think what you'll find is, and what we found is that in markets like Colombia, the volume of players are larger, which helps to offset the revenue spend per player.
Interesting. And what about this aspect, I suppose, of differentiation? How you differentiate yourself both from legitimate competitors, but you mentioned the offshore market, which presumably means, what we may term illegal operators or unlicensed operators, let's put it that way, obviously targeting the market as well. How do you fight those battles?
If you're asking me, I'll jump in with an answer.
Yeah, and then we'll go to Andre and then JD perhaps after last.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think differentiation is really one of the most important things, especially in increasingly competitive markets where you have a lot of brands and a lot of products and a lot of companies competing, and to attract the player, of course, once they attract them, to retain them. I think a lot of times having your own technology platform like we have really helps, because you can constantly innovate, improve things, get feedback from the players that are implemented in the technology itself to improve it. At the end of the day, what you have to worry about is the conversion rates. How many players that register on your site end up making a first deposit? Then you have to worry about the retention once they've made a first deposit. And little improvements you make to the product experience are always helping to improve those conversion rates. So, for example, we've built all kinds of unique features into our platform that are hard for others to replicate, or if they are, it will take a long time. So we're having players playing slot games, and then they trigger a bingo game, and they play bingo for free play. It's just creating a community and a social experience, something that is differentiated from what you typically see. So that helps us to retain the players that we attract.
How about you, Andre? Betsson is obviously one of the largest, best known.
I fully agree. Yeah, Rosa, in here, we strongly believe what Richard just said, and we are basically addressing the market with a totally different than I think original approach from the inside. Onshore, so we have a very unique value proposition. We started with racing, and as we speak, we're just launching daily fantasy in Brazil. We're gonna be pushing this product forward in the second half of March. This is something that we did not make a big fuss yet, but this is something that we are also launching in the following weeks. The idea is basically to differentiate as much as possible and to make a good impact from the beginning on this new audience. That's what JD just said. I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's about generating a great experience with a very unique product. So we are basically following this philosophy down the line. And to add up to the product perspective, we do think that from as Latins, we like, especially in the beginning, to have like a very personal interaction. So the way you interact with your audience needs to be very close. If it's not through the phone, you need to be creative, because at the end of the day, this is something that the audience, especially with a new value proposition, is expecting from you. It makes a difference for you to be very close to your audience and to generate a great experience from day one.
So you'd rather go slowly and get it right to begin with, is what you're saying, you know, where you have the messaging right, the relationships right.
Yes.
How about you? I mean, JD, obviously you've been, as I say, in the market for a lot longer. I mean, how do you view increased competition? I mean, in some ways, obviously we welcome regulation, we welcome legalization, we welcome, sort of more advanced markets, that's better for players, it's better for everybody. But, from your point of view, how much, how do you view this excitement about the market? And the other players in the market.
Right. So
the
thank you, Ross.
in the market, not the players.
Yeah. So first of all, on the whole differentiation point, I think it's a never-ending game, right? Because as soon as you have a different experience for the customer, someone else is replicating it, right? So it's never-ending. You have to stay at the forefront of the process and always keep on innovating. And in the end, I do believe that everything is organic, and it's the little things, and it's the basic processes of the experience that where there's very little friction, no surprises for the customer. That's what's going to make the difference in the end, right? As far as the increase in competition, I mean, it's been a learning curve for myself and for Betcris, because in many markets, I took over Betcris in 2006, and the difference, say, in Mexico or in other markets of how things were, back 10 years ago and how it is now, it's night and day, right? The increasing competition. Now I can see how limited the acquisition channels are in some of these markets, where there is a potential for someone, for a company to come in and try to actually corner the market on customer acquisition opportunities. I mean, I believe, Richard, you probably get a little taste of that in Colombia with WPlay and BetPlay, the way they advertise, so heavily. I mean, same thing for us in Mexico with Caliente. I mean, they are all over the place, and the time that we are able to get on some of these marketing opportunities is quite limited, from what we would like to get, and that drives the prices up and make things a little bit more difficult. So competition comes with those challenges, but also, I mean, most bettors, they cycle, through different companies. That's the normal behavior. They would stick with one company for a while, and then they see a promo from another company. They try that company for a little while. So I believe friendly competition and good competition is good and healthy for any market to have. But again, it's not always the case. I mean, we do have unlicensed operators in a lot of the markets where we operate, and they come in and they don't have to pay taxes. They don't have to do many of the things that we do, right? They don't provide jobs, and they don't really abide by the law, and they're able to be more aggressive, and that isn't right, and it's not everywhere where the regulator has the ability to block websites, and even that, we know it's not really a final solution, right? So it's like in any game, you have to learn how to play it. In our case, the mission for Betcris is we want everyone to want to play ball with us, right? And in that sense, I mean, trying to make everyone happy, our team, customers, the providers, the regulators, and it's about sharing knowledge, and in the end, we want steady growth. We're not looking for a quick win. It's about making sure that we're around, years and years from now. And I believe that only a few of us will stand, after everything is said and done. We're still in a growth phase. I mean, it's an emerging market, Latin America. I believe there's still more operators who want to come in. I mean, there's definitely going to be some consolidation. I mean, it's very exciting. It's still just the beginning for the region.
Great. So, the competition is really good for everybody as long as everybody's playing, by the same rules, I suppose. And it makes you up your game, makes everybody up their game. But it's, it's in everybody's interest to improve the market, as you say, educate the players, make sure that the regulations are supportive of, the industry, as well as protecting citizens, etc. But ultimately, by sharing information, by teaching people how to do things well, you're improving the general market, right? We have a few questions actually from the audience. So before we run out of time, I thought maybe we should address some of those. I mean, one is from Zeno Osco, and he's asking actually what we were talking about earlier about educating the players. So how do you do that? Richard, perhaps we can start with you on that one.
Sure. I think, when it's online gambling is a new category for many players, so you have to educate them again how you register and do tutorials and make things as simple as possible to get started. Of course, then the payment methods are the next part of the education process, to explain to them how they work. The greater variety you have, the more seamlessly they're integrated into the user experience, the easier it will be for players. I think little things like having tips to explain to players how different payment methods work is helpful. But of course, once they start playing, a lot of the sports in particular isn't something that a lot of the more recreational players understand. So being able to articulate that in a clear way, when it comes to slot games, I think there's maybe an easier learning curve for that. So I think it's about offering a variety of events and content and having a really high quality customer service team, because the players will have questions, and the more efficient you are with your responses, the more helpful your team is. The more thoughtful they are, having help centers and information that the players can access easily, I think all helps to reduce the friction for the player, and ultimately reducing friction from the player experience, and then doing tutorials and making things as simple and honest and transparent as you can for the player, I think is really how we try to approach the educational process.
I mean, a question that comes to mind for me is there more sort of peer-to-peer products and things out there? So whereby, as you said, word of mouth is so important, JD, that players are talking to each other about how to bet, sort of sharing scores. I mean, particularly obviously in fantasy, that facilitates that aspect of it. So, well, maybe Andre, since you said you were launching a fantasy product, I mean, do you see more peer-to-peer action kind of thing in this market, these markets, I should say?
I'm sorry, was a question for me or for Andre?
It is. Oh, sorry, it was for Andre, but I think there's a time lag with us and Andre. So go ahead and answer it, perhaps, JD, since I think.
Well, yeah, again, I mean, yeah. Latinos are quite social, maybe for me, it's natural. I mean, I'm Latino, but for people from the outside, I always hear, oh yeah, the warmth of the Latino culture, the dancing, the passion, it's a different culture, right? And so I think that needs to be embedded in the strategy of the education of the customers. Like I said, I mean, the authority, a friend of mine, an acquaintance, or someone who I see as my peer, as my equal, the authority they have when they explain to me how it works, and they imply that it's safe, they're going to get paid. it's fun, that excitement, and I mean, I can only imagine. I've seen this happen in some of our shops, where we have one person who enjoys being in our shop more than others, and they're there all the time. I mean, they begin to turn into the expert, and they are educating the other customers, and then the other customers come in and they ask, so what did you bet today? And they start explaining, I bet this thing, I combined it with that, and that is gold right there. So we're trying to replicate that online. I see a question that from one of the viewers saying that our products look a lot like European products. I mean, at the end of the day, if you look at all products in the world, they all share about 80% of the same things. It's that the content is basically the same. The way it's presented is somewhat different. The logic is a little bit different. Like Richard said, I mean, very important is the onboarding process, the difference on that the purchase decision to actually make the deposit. That's key right there, and that's very different, I believe, from the European style products. But yeah, in the end, I think the social aspect, Ross, if I may refer to that, is key. And anyone coming into Latin America, if they don't have that, they're gonna be talking to the people who definitely just wanna bet, but they're not gonna be getting as many new customers. And they're not going to be educating those customers. So that's a strategy. I mean, there's people already doing that, and that might be a decision. I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to dedicate resources to that, But I believe that if you want to grow in Latin America, you have to be ready to apply the education strategy.
That sounds fairly organic, the way that you're going about it. There's a guy in the betting shop, he's telling his mates about it. Presumably you have the social platforms to allow them to discuss that. But from a product point of view, are you facilitating that? Maybe Andre, I don't know if you heard the question before, but there was a time lag, so we didn't allow you time to answer. Perhaps do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I'm fully on the same page. JD's page. At the end of the day, it's all about educational content through social interaction. At the end of the day, I think this is the perfect combination where things really happen in an effective way. Latins are very, very social, and they trust their acquaintances more than anyone. So it's about providing the right content to flow accordingly.
Well, that seems to be a clear message then. So educational content via social interaction. So a couple more questions. One lady, so there's Adriana Montealegre, and she's asking, what are the organizational challenges of opening up an operation in Latin America? I.e., is it hard to find the right people, hard to find talent? You're smiling, JD, so perhaps you can answer that one first.
Okay, yeah, I'm smiling because I just went through a series of interviews, recruiting talent for a few new markets that we're lining up, and what I'm finding is that the people with experience is definitely somewhat difficult to find, but that's not really a bad thing. I believe our business, our industry. Has a lot of similarities to other industries, such as the finance sector. If you think about it, we're all trying to get customers to open accounts, and that happens in other industries as well. Banks, credit card companies, and so on. So the talent is there. There might be a learning curve, but at the end of the day, it might not be a bad thing to grab someone from a different industry and just maybe give them a little bit of the gaming part. But I think that helps improve the game at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Richard, I'm going to ask you the same question then. So, coming in as an outsider, I guess, if we may call you that. Andre, as I say, is, from Brazil, but what challenges did you experience in setting up, like the physical operations?
Yeah, no, I think it's really important that you find local leadership that really understands the local market and give them enough flexibility to run the business. I think when you try to mandate things from across different continents and do things the way that you do things elsewhere, it won't really work as well locally. So I think the first thing was that. Second thing is, when we started, we had no one in our company that spoke Spanish, but we obviously had to build up a business in Colombia. So you have to figure out the right leadership, the right corporate structures in terms of having local compliance, not necessarily relying on your corporate compliance, because the way compliance is handled is slightly different between the different markets. So I think being really even marketing, I think recognizing that you really have to localize your operation. And attracting talent is hard initially, potentially, if you don't have a reputation and you're new into the industry or new to the region. So you have to really just establish yourself as a best-in-class operator and have a great reputation elsewhere, and try to leverage that to try to attract the right talent and be able to, once you attract them, to retain them. So I think it comes down to, there are a lot of challenges. I think the banking for us, we didn't talk about it earlier, but that was a really big challenge for us. When we came there, even though it was a legal market, we couldn't get a bank for a year and a half, essentially, to work with us, which was required by the regulations in Colombia. And so we would speak to the ownership of some banks. In other cases, we come through the sales organization. Other times we come through the business development or the compliance. Whatever avenue or entry we went into these banks, it didn't matter. And so it was really strange to have such a challenging environment to have an authorized legal activity. But I think it came down to persistence. And obviously, as the industry matures and other companies are able to secure relationships with different vendors, it probably becomes easier for others to then be able to jump in. But in the early days, it was really difficult. So I think you have to really focus and be disciplined with your approach, and not try to take shortcuts, which I think is sometimes what companies try to do, because you're trying to catch up to the industry leaders.
Yes, well, that's the human aspect of it, although you mentioned banking as well. We have one final question, which I do want to get to, from our mutual friend, JD Pablo Bermudez. He's asking, what do you consider to be the next step in sports betting's technological evolution in Latin America? So, a meeting to finish.
Yeah, I mean, the next step, I think we're still working on the current one. It's basically technology. We need to, I guess, walk along with how the infrastructure of each market, each country is developing, right? In most countries now, there's widespread access to smartphones and good internet, right? So that's definitely improving the game. Our numbers on the usage of mobile and apps is through the roof. So that's great. I think that is a great experience for the customers, being able to just pick up the phone. They don't even have to log in, and then they can make their bets. I believe that's great. I think maybe what I can say is that one of the next steps is to actually reduce the number of physical locations that are needed in LatAm. I believe it was. I don't know if it was Richard who mentioned this, but the locations that people in LatAm, the customers, they value them because that's physical address. It's not a .com. If they have an issue, in the back of their minds they have they think, okay, if I have an issue, if I have a question, I can go there. And it's similar to what's happening with banks again. Where digital banks nowadays, there's this push to move everything online, where customers can do everything on their phone instead of having to go to a physical bank branch to do whatever they have to do. And so we go along the same lines, right? So the one thing that is not seen a lot in LatAm is the self-service betting terminals. That's something that I believe can help transition people out of the physical locations. I don't think we want to get rid of them 100%, but I think that, I guess that's what I would say. I don't really see anything else coming in. I think maybe some innovative ways of placing the bets, instead of the traditional logic, some different ways for people to interact with the betting, where they, instead of knowing what they want to bet, maybe they log in to see what's available for them in a prepackaged way. I mean, this is nothing really new. It already exists, but I believe that that's going to catch on. So things like that, I guess.
Great. Thank you. So we've almost run out of time. We have, maybe a minute or so left for any sort of final remarks. Do you have anything to say either on that, Andre, and then Richard as well, or anything else to sum up your experience and where, what else you're excited about? Andre,
okay, I can start. I think it's very exciting I think it's very exciting to be part of a long-term play that is just starting to unfold. There's a lot of potential across the region in all of the countries, and discussing projects and growth is always exciting. And at the end of the day, I think this is seen from Mexico to Argentina all around. There's a lot going on in terms of regulatory changes. Brazil, Argentina, Peru, Chile, sorry. So at the end of the day, I think it's the growth perspective, but the Latin region is the appealing edge that I see through right now.
And Richard, any final thoughts from you about what you're excited about going forwards? Oh, are we not hearing him?
Yeah, hi. So I was saying that South America is a fast growth market, great opportunity given that it's less competitive than some of the other regions, large populations, regulation coming, big growth ahead. And the last thing I want to add is there was a lot of talk during this session about community. And I think some of the products, I didn't get a chance to answer that question, but I think some of the products in the future are going to have to evolve towards being more community focused to reflect the cultural background of a lot of the consumers in these markets.
Very exciting. Well, making me want to go there. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing all of your, your knowledge. And we didn't, we never have enough time to explore everything, but I think we had some quite interesting insights there. So thank you, JD, thank you, Andre, and thank you, Richard, very much for your time today.
Thank you as well.